You're tuned in to The Keetria Show and listening to SOB, Style of Business, the podcast with your host, Keetria. We aim to highlight the ongoing trek of entrepreneurs and business owners from around the globe, featuring stories that recount their struggles, experiences, and inevitable road to success and self-fulfillment. Welcome to SOB.
This podcast is being brought to you by my inspiring new book titled Courage is a Muscle, Using Heart to Power Your Entrepreneurial Dreams. You can grab your copy today on Amazon. Hey, what's up, y'all? Thanks so much for tuning in and checking out another hot episode of SOB, Style of Business, the podcast. This is your host, Keetria. And today we have another wonderful guest by the name of Stacy Zeal, who is the CEO of Mary Zeal, which is an online community for women, specifically specializing in self-care and helping women on their wellness journeys. And she's also the host of High on Self-Care, the podcast. And we're going to be talking about cannabis, weed, y'all know what that is, right? And really how it is a good resource when you talk about self-care and, just really helping people to understand. So I'm not going to get too much into it. I'm going to let Stacy go ahead and drop that introduction. And then as we roll through the podcast, you'll see how this has really been helpful and it's changing people's lives. So anyway, Stacy, drop that intro for us and let's keep this thing going.
Hey, everybody. Again, as you mentioned, my name is Stacy Zeal. I'm so excited to be here. So I am the CEO of MaryZeal.com and host of High on Self-Care podcast, where I really help women to learn to prioritize self-care and doing it through the lens of cannabis. So using cannabis as a tool to help with your self-care journey is something that I love to talk about and I love to do. So I'm also a yoga teacher and I'm a serial entrepreneur. I think I was destined to be an entrepreneur because I've started so many businesses because I've had just so many quote unquote passions.
Yeah, as all of us,
so I've definitely been someone. Yeah, so I'm definitely someone who's not afraid to kind of like try something that I like. And so now where I'm at is where I talk about cannabis, I talk about self-care, because those are kind of two things that were foundational in my story. So I started teaching yoga a few years ago when I was living in Las Vegas. And I loved it. And I loved learning about yoga and the practice of it. So I took a teacher training, and then naturally they teach you how to become a teacher.
Yeah.
And so I started teaching after I finished, and I realized I didn't like teaching. I liked learning and doing and living yoga and the principles and doing it, but I didn't really like actually the teaching aspect of it. I felt like I was getting close to burnout. And so I started to kind of like follow these random little quote unquote, again, passions that I had because I was trying to escape from a job that I didn't like outside of that. So I've been a side hustler for a while. And so it's definitely been a journey for me to get to where I'm at now, where cannabis and self-care is the front of the conversation, just because like cannabis is another thing that's been foundational in my story. It's just that, and it's like I have insomnia and we can kind of go into that, but that's kind of my background. Like I'm definitely like a yogi. I meditate every day. So I live and breathe self-care. I consider myself a high functioning stoner. I smoke before I do most things.
Right.
And so I want to, help women to realize that, you can use if you're using cannabis intentionally along with your self-care, you can really get in alignment with who you are and start to create the life that you want.
Oh, wow. I have been dying, like I told you before we started, I've been dying really to have a conversation with somebody who really is a student of cannabis and really working to understand how that helps, along the self-care journey. Not to be, because sometimes recreation, that's good, that's cool. But when you're purposeful with it and there's an actual intention behind the use of it, I think it just, it extends a little bit further. So I cannot wait until we really get into uncovering a lot of the jewels of the conversation, because I really think people will kind of understand the difference between the different, strands, what it actually does, how it affects the body and all that other stuff, and not to say like we're not medical professionals, so don't, do your research, people. But I think, just kind of coming from somebody who was dealing with insomnia and then just finding a something to really help to kind of taper that off. And, I look, let me stop because I'm doing a lot right now. Let me just get into this. tell us about the story, because there's obviously other things that you could have tried. And I was reading where you said, you tried the caffeine, the melatonin, like things like that. There's prescription drugs, there's Ambien and Claritin and all of this stuff that people take, when they can't sleep or when they have different medical situations. But give us a little bit of background, Stacy, about how you actually discovered that this would work for you.
Yeah, so it's so interesting. So I had a wake-up call moment, and that's how I came to weed. So I definitely was someone who has been around cannabis. So my friends all smoke. I just never was someone who wanted to smoke. I didn't think there was anything wrong with weed. I just didn't want to.
Yeah.
So for years, I just kind of just let's say, oh yeah, you guys smoke, whatever, but I just didn't want to. So for years, and then so fast forward to about 4 or 5 years ago, I was on my way to work one day, and it was early in the morning. I had to work. I had to be to work at 8 o'clock in the morning or something. So it was 7:30 in the morning. I was on my way to work, and I guess I should start by saying, for years, I've had insomnia for as long as I can remember. And I thought it was normal. I thought not being able to sleep was just something that was just normal. So I know that my aunts are on sleeping pills. My mom has issues sleeping. So I know that my family just had sleeping issues. And so I just thought that it was normal. And so I was just pushing through, right? That's what we do.
Exactly.
We kind of just push through and we get through. And I was getting through fine until I was driving to work this day and I fell asleep driving.
Oh, wow.
And that was so scary, right? So fortunately, no one was hurt. I wasn't hurt, and and what I took from that situation was just a serious wake-up call that I need to focus on insomnia. Getting through is not living, right? Just being able to push through and being tired all the time. I still remember how it feels to just be tired all day and to just be pushing through and to be drinking all the coffee and drinking the water and just trying to get yourself through the day, and then not being able to sleep at night because you have insomnia. So it's you're tired all day and then you try to go to sleep. It's you start to develop anxiety around sleep, because I knew I couldn't sleep for the longest time. So it gave me anxiety, going to bed gave me anxiety. So that one on top of the insomnia just led to a really a not restful sleep at all. So I get to this point, and so I say, okay, look, I'm going to take this insomnia thing seriously. So naturally, the millennial in me just started Googling everything. So I'm okay, what can I do to help me with sleep? So I tried everything from melatonin. That didn't work for me. It gave me nightmares. So that didn't work. I tried cutting caffeine after 2 p.m. I tried increasing my water intake. I've tried sleep stories, meditations, all kinds of stuff. I have a white noise machine. Yeah. So I've tried all of the things, right? And none of that stuff consistently worked. So my next step from there was to go to a doctor, because I said, okay, I still need to take this seriously. And I think I might have even drifted off to sleep again in that point where I realized, okay, this stuff is just not working because I'm not consistently sleeping. So I end up finally deciding to go to a doctor, and, got all these tests done, got my blood tested, all that kind of stuff. And so he prescribed me sleeping pills. And so I took the sleeping pills the first night. Can I tell you, I slept amazing, right? So I just I knocked out. I was oh my goodness, this is great, right? I finally solved my problem. Awesome. So about a week and a half in, I realized, okay, it's taking me longer to fall asleep. I'm starting to wake up in the middle of the night again, because my insomnia is I have an issue falling asleep and staying asleep. So even when I would fall asleep, I would wake up in the middle of the night sometimes. And so I'm okay, I'm starting to wake up again. I'm starting not to fall asleep as much. So about 2 weeks in, I called the doctor and I said, hey, these pills aren't working anymore, because they just completely stopped working. And so he said, oh yeah, people can build up a tolerance to sleeping pills. So, let me tell you what his advice was, right? Before you save your second guess. So this is his advice, right? This is a doctor that gave me this advice. Okay. He says, I suggest you take the sleeping pills for 2 weeks and then not take the sleeping pills for 2 weeks and just alternate like that. And my first thought was, so I'm supposed to sleep great for 2 weeks and then not sleep at all for 2 weeks? How does that help me?
You'll be all right. Right.
The doctor had told me that I had built, I was pretty much running on adrenaline. My body had learned how to function with just adrenaline, So I'm that doesn't make sense to me that I would sleep great for 2 weeks and then just be exhausted for 2 weeks. How does that help my body?
Right.
And so at my wit's end, and I kind of find this is where the cannabis comes into the conversation, because where I was living in Las Vegas, cannabis had just gone recreational. Well, it was becoming recreationally legal. We had just voted to legalize it recreationally. And so the dispensaries were going to be opening up soon. And so I said, okay, what do I have to lose? I was at a job that did randoms. And so that was another thing that was like, okay, what am I going to do if I get pulled up for a random?
Yeah.
But at the same time, I didn't like that job.
Yeah,
so and I was looking for actively looking for a way out of this job anyway. So I said, I don't like this job, and my field is marketing. So, it was a marketing job, and I just was like, I can find another job. Like I have, I can get another job.
Right.
And so these are all the fears that are coming up, right? And this is a fear that people experience when they want to turn to cannabis for, medicinal uses or to help them with something. Like I've talked to people who have had Crohn's who use it, or who have all types of different ailments that it can help with. Yeah. And so I decided to go to the dispensary, and from there, I just was like, that's all she wrote. Like cannabis literally helps me sleep to this day, and it's been a few years. I think it was in maybe 2015 or 2014 that I started using. And so to this day, that's the main thing that helps me sleep. And now I'm at a place where I am well rested. I wake up in the morning, I have energy. I have a morning routine now. Like I'm a morning person now. And I never thought I could be a morning person because I just was like, oh, well, I just hate mornings. I'm not a morning person. But really what it was is I was too tired to even function in the morning from not being able to sleep. I had to get through work. Like I had to save all my energy to be able to get through work and get home and do all the things that we have to do. And that was really like when I started using cannabis and started to really like feel the results of feel the effects of getting consistent sleep. That's where the magic started to happen. Cause I was just like, oh, like, this is great. So now I started using cannabis in my self-care. I started smoking before I went to my yoga classes and stuff like that. And I'm like, oh, it just kind of like, it deepens the practice. Like, my meditation, my high meditation is really it elevates the meditation. Like meditation is great, but adding cannabis to the mix just kind of elevates it and makes you go deeper and stuff like that. So that's how I got to cannabis and how I started to really like incorporate it with my self-care.
Wow. Yeah, I love that. And I can't wait. So we're going to be talking about high on self-care, your actual podcast here in a bit. But speaking of like, okay, so you discovered that cannabis works for you. You don't have the insomnia. You're able to function. Tell us a little bit about your experience when it comes to like productivity versus the relaxation mode. Because, some people on a recreational end is more to relax. But with you, especially when you have to work and things like that, and you want to be functional, like, did that bother you at all? Like, did you have any issues with not being able to function? And because I know that's a concern of some people, oh, if I get high and I can't, perform, I'm not able to do my work efficiently. Like, did that ever come up for you, that conversation?
Yeah, so it definitely does. It definitely does come up, and I come across that conversation now because, like, I've been smoking for a few years, so again, I call myself a high functioning stoner because I can just do lots of things high. Yeah. And so right. It's really what I tell people is pay attention to one, like what you're taking, because cannabis, it's a plant, right? And so it's literally a plant. And so it has, so there are different chemical makeups of that plant that cause it to do different things. And when I started using cannabis, I really I'm a learner. Like one of my strengths is learning and figuring shit out. Yeah. So when I started smoking, I just dove into like figuring out, okay, why is this working for me? Like I love that it's working and it's amazing, but I'm curious. I want to know what is happening inside of my body that is making this work because and I will say, like, I consider the fact that I still do have insomnia. So like, if I don't smoke, I will not be able to sleep. So, for me, like, although I use it in other ways and like, for self-care and I use it recreationally as well, but like, I still have to incorporate that into my sleep. Yeah. So I find it as something that is actively helping with my insomnia to this day, like still actively helping. And so, one, you want to pay attention to what you're actually consuming because within the chemical plant, without kind of going too deep down the rabbit hole of cannabis, like, so cannabis is made up of what is called terpenes. And when you think of terpenes are kind of like essential oils. So essential oils, like if you have a lavender oil, right, like you smell the lavender oil, it's going to give you a calming effect. That's just that's just what kind of effect it has on the body. So if you think about terpenes act in the same kind of way. Like terpenes dictate how the cannabis smells. And based on that terpene and that smell, it's going to give you a different effect. So for example, if you have a strain of cannabis that is like, say it's lemon kush, right? So in the title, there's lemon in there. So you can naturally kind of think like, okay, like if you smell a lemon, when you smell the scent of lemon, it's uplifting, it's energizing, it wakes you up.
Yeah.
So that's similar to how the terpenes work within cannabis. Like what I tell people is what you want to look for is, one, on the base level, dispensaries kind of classify cannabis as sativa, indica, or hybrid. Yeah. And sativa strains tend to be more energizing, uplifting, a head high kind of strain. And that's what I smoke predominantly. And I can get into like how I use sativas for sleep, because what I'm about to tell you about indicas is going to make you think, oh, I should use indicas to sleep.
Yeah.
But then I'm going to tell you about how I don't actually smoke indicas to go to sleep. I actually smoke sativas to sleep. But anyway, so sativas, again, they're more head high, they're more uppers, and they give you energy, because the terpenes that are in sativas tend to be more uplifting terpenes. So like you might have limonene in there, which sounds like lemon, but so you can think of it as lemon. So like it energizes, it uplifts you, etc. And then you have indicas, which are more your sedative, your relaxing, your couch lock type strains. And they have a lot of myrcene in it, because the myrcene terpene is what makes your body relax. And then you have hybrids, which are like a 50-50, or can lean one way or the other. Like it might be a sativa leaning hybrid or an indica leaning hybrid. So that's kind of how you can look at it on the base level. So when you go to dispensaries, that's how they classify them. And then what you're actually, when you look within, so I always tell people, like, pick something with, usually if you're just starting out, like pick something within sativa, if you want to use it for, daytime type stuff. If you have a lot of pain, indicas are great for pain. But if you want to be functioning and up, sativas tend to give you that more, because it allows you to kind of like be more up and awake. And so that's what I try to tell people. And then the other thing I tell people, in addition to knowing what you're smoking and what's inside of what you're smoking, what you want to pay attention to is your dosing, right? So if you smoke, how much or at least start to pay attention to, if you don't know. But I know how much I can smoke before I get fucked up. Like if I'm way too high, like I know that it's because I smoked a whole lot, right?
Oh, but so
before I jump into work, or doing something, like I'll smoke, to the point where I can feel high, but I still feel functional. I don't feel like, my mind is like, to the point where I'm high and my mind's wandering and going, going crazy or doing this. But I also look for things like that have pinene in it, which is another terpene. Pinene is great for focus. So if you need to do something that you need to focus, pick something with some pinene in it, and that'll help you with that. So, I love that you kind of bring up, using cannabis more than just recreationally, because I do believe that the intention behind it will also kind of dictate the effects you get. So like when I go and smoke and meditate, the intention is to smoke so that I can go and meditate and sit and, feel elevated and stuff like that. So when I smoke something, I want to smoke something that makes me feel lifted and elevated, because that's how I like to feel when I meditate. Some people like to feel really like grounded. So if you want to feel like grounded and connected to the earth, you might want to try an indica or something with some myrcene in it, because that'll help you feel really connected to the ground. So I would say, as to kind of recap, because I know I just like kind of spit out a lot there, but like to recap, you want to make sure you're paying attention to what you're smoking, and beyond just like sativa or indica or hybrid, kind of looking at the terpenes of what the makeup of it is, if it's that's available. Like if you're getting your weed from your street vendor,
right,
do what you got to do, right?
Tell him what he's putting in there, right?
Right, exactly. But if you have the luxury to be able to go to a dispensary, you can always ask them what terpenes are in it. And all licensed dispensaries have, at least the ones I know of in Las Vegas and Maryland, where I'm currently living, like they have to tell you what's in it. Like if you ask them, they're all tested to know what's in it. So you can look and see what the terpenes are, and then also pay attention to your dosing and your intention behind it. Like if you're intending to rest, that's fine. Like smoke something that's going to, sit on the couch and give you a little relaxation or whatever. But, all of those things together will really like help you to find something that you can take, or even like if you want to take CBD, like it doesn't have to be THC, like CBD won't give you that high feeling, but it's more like the medicinal part of it. So I take CBD in the morning. I take CBD in the morning as well. So,
Exactly. Okay.
and if you ever, just a tip, like if you get too high, you can take CBD and CBD will bring you down. So those are kind of some things that I would look out for when you want to incorporate cannabis throughout your day rather than just as something that you do recreationally.
That's perfect. And thank you for that explanation, because the next question was pretty much centered around a lot of what you just covered with, especially for somebody that is, maybe they don't want to do the prescription pill route, and they're having different types of medical conditions or ailments. And, CBD is an option, or maybe they just feel like, I don't know enough about it, or the smoking. And, a lot of people don't know that there's multiple ways to consume it. And then in addition to that, I think a lot of people get CBD mixed up with it actually being, a THC infused product, which we know like there's different levels and components of it. But explain to us a little bit about for a new person that is going into a CBD dispensary, okay, and they have all these different types of products. There's liquid, there's, the little, I can't even get the word out. The little liquid infused, oh my gosh. You know what I'm talking about. Okay.
Tinctures?
Yeah, the tinctures. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
What can I say that? Okay. And then also, so you got the hemp pre-rolls, right? You have the different strains. You have the gummies, right? And so all of those things are on display, but you have somebody that is interested. They don't know what to take. And you said, hey, ask questions. Figure out what your intention is, but give us a little bit about like what the actual difference is between the CBD. Then you have the hemp pre-rolls. Then you have the THC. Like how do you kind of pick that apart so that you walk away with one product and not a basket full of, all of these different products, so that can be confusing.
Yeah, for sure. And it's so interesting. Like when I first walked into a dispensary, it is kind of, for anybody who's not been to a dispensary before, going into a dispensary is like going into an art gallery.
Right.
Like there is stuff on display. You get like, it's clean. For anyone that I've been to, it's clean. The bud tenders, they're very knowledgeable about the product and all that kind of stuff. So I would say one, ask questions. Like when I went in to first get some cannabis for my sleep, the guy, the bud tender recommended indica. And because I'm just, a little extra, I was like, well, give me indica, sativa, and a hybrid. I need all three because I need to see what's going to work for me, right? So it is a little overwhelming when you go in there because there's so many choices, right? So one thing I would say is definitely if you have the option, ask questions. Like this is their job, and they love it, right? Like at least, just from talking to bartenders and stuff like that, they seem like, people love to talk about weed all day. So ask questions. But I would say when you're looking at ways to consume, so kind of starting at the top, like if you're looking at it kind of like a pyramid, well, I guess not a pyramid because this is going to have 2 points. So you have THC and you have CBD. Mm-hmm. So THC and CBD are cannabinoids within the cannabis plant. And THC is what gives you the euphoric high, like whatever kind of, mind altering, quote unquote, high you get. It comes from the THC. CBD is more like the medicinal part of cannabis. So it's not going to give you a high per se, but you will start it will elevate your mood. It will help with pain. You just won't necessarily feel that, hazy kind of high that you can feel when you smoke THC. Yeah. So if you start with those two things, you have, like I said, you have your THC and you have your CBD. Underneath of those things are just different ways to consume. So for example, hemp is essentially cannabis, right? Hemp and cannabis plants are literally exactly the same. They're grown, for the most part, they're grown the same, but their purposes are different. So hemp plants don't have any THC in them. So they have to have, I believe, less than 0.03% THC in it for it to be sold, because CBD was legalized federally with the passage of the Hemp Act. And so I can't remember exactly what the act is called, but it's if you Google it and look it up, there's an act that essentially legalized hemp. And hemp and CBD is what can come from hemp, right? So the CBD that you buy online, that's coming from a hemp plant. If you're buying CBD inside of a dispensary, it's most likely coming from a cannabis plant that has THC in it. They've just been able to either separate the THC or the CBD, or sometimes you'll find strains that have both THC and CBD in it. So if you look at a hybrid, for example, it'll probably have both of those things in it because it gives you the relaxing effect as well as the uplifting effect. So I would say like underneath of those things, you have the ways to consume. So you can consume THC and CBD, or THC or CBD via edibles, because they make CBD gummies, they make THC gummies. You can you can roll up flour, so you can get CBD flour or hemp flour. Hemp can be made into like paper, and it can be made into clothing or like fabric that you can make clothing out of. So really, like, you know, the difference starts at the top. It starts at how much THC is in the plant. So you, just as you can smoke, like if you go to you can get a bud of, you know, THC, a bud of strain with THC in it. You can also get a bud of something with no THC in it with only CBD, and you can smoke that as well, or you can do it as an edible, or you can do a tincture. So really, like, what you want to start with is, how do I want to feel? Again, going back to the intention. It's like, do I want to feel that high or don't I? That's a, you know, kind of yes or no. If you do want to feel high, then you can say, okay, let me check out these THC products, because essentially, like, the THC products and the CBD products, they are made, they come in the same kind of forms. Like I said, you can get gummies, you can get flour, you can get tinctures, you can get suppositories, you can get all of these different types of things. But what the differentiating factor is whether it has CBD in it or whether it has THC in it. And that is going to determine where you can buy it, because you can only buy products with a certain amount, over a certain percentage of THC. And so I'm generalizing. So don't, you know,
don't quote.
The cannabis Nazis don't come in like, you know, beat me up over the exact percentages. Right. But so, you know, and if you're buying something online, most likely it's CBD, and it most likely probably comes from a hemp plant or something like that. If you're buying something in a dispensary, it most likely either has THC in it, or it came from a plant that had THC in it. And those are kind of the differences. So figuring out how you want to feel and what method feels comfortable to you. Like, you know, whether that's smoking, whether that's, you know, taking an edible, whether that's taking a tincture, or you can get like CBD honey. I love CBD infused honey in my tea. You can get CBD tea bags. Like, there's this company that I love, called Twin Flame Teas, and they make amazing, like, you know, hemp CBD teas that are like mixed with different herbs and stuff like that. So it's lovely to kind of see that the ways to consume cannabis are so broad. And I think that when people don't consume it and they don't go down this kind of rabbit hole of cannabis, like they think all you can do is smoke it. And it's like, no, you can consume cannabis in so many different ways. And it's amazing because, you know, if you look at like sleeping pills, for example, for me, like I had to take a pill.
Right. Yeah.
Now, if I want for my sleep aid now is, do I want to smoke? Do I want to drink it in some infused honey? Do I, you know, there are THC beverages that I have for, you know, so it's so many different ways. And so you can really find something that's most comfortable for you.
Wow. I love it. So many options. And speaking of options, and definitely want to highlight the self-care journey and the community that you're creating. Let's talk about Mary Zeal and also your podcast, High on Self-Care. Of course, we know the purpose and the reason behind you actually going down the journey and you know, sharing your information and the things that you've learned in regards to cannabis. But tell us a little bit more about your online community and also the podcast.
Yeah, so Mary Zeal came out of the pandemic.
Wow, okay. Another good
one
creation.
Of those things. Yeah, so yeah, it's one of those things, you know, 2020 was the ultimate year to make us all kind of stop.
Right.
And for me, it was like that moment when I realized that I had to take my insomnia seriously. It was a moment of pause. It was a moment of, Stacy, you have a choice. What are you going to do? Are you going to, you know, choose to continue to ignore this insomnia, or are you going to take this sign and actually take action? So when I slowed down in 2020, I decided to really like sit with myself and really pour super, super heavy into my self-care, because, you know, it was a crazy year. And for me, my default is self-care. Like you know, for a long time it wasn't. And so that's why I found I was kind of bouncing between things and running away from a job or jobs that I didn't like, rather than going inward and looking to see, like, Stacy, what do you actually want to do? And what do you actually like to do? Mm-hmm. And so when I had that space, like, you know, I stopped and I said, like, well, what do I want to do? Like, I had taken a break from entrepreneurship for a couple years because I had found a job. I had a job that I love. Well, I still have that job that I love in marketing. And I do love marketing, as, you know, just as a profession. But when I had to stop and sit and think, and it's like, okay, I got the big name on my resume that I wanted. And that's why I took a break from entrepreneurship, because I wanted that big name on my resume. And so I got it, and now I have it.
Oh, wow.
Well, now what do you want to do, Stacey? Because now I think that I am ready to fly on my own, right? All of these life experiences that we have prepare us for something. So starting these other businesses has all prepared me. I've learned something from each thing, and it's prepared me for this moment. And so when I started Mary Zeal, I stopped to think like, well, what do you like to do, Stacey? What do you want to do? And I said, well, I love talking about weed all day. I would love to have a job where I can smoke weed all day. And I can help people.
Good, right.
And so when I started it because that's what I want to help people do. I want to help people to realize that, one, you can use cannabis with intention and it can help with your self-care. But two, like self-care and going inward is how you figure out what you want to do with your life. It's how you figure out how to make the next best decision for your life. Because, our world tells us that all of the answers are outside of us, right? It tells us that the answer to what you want to do in life and your passion and finding that, all that stuff is outside of us. So if you only were to talk to this coach, they would have the answer for you. Or you look at this article, that article will have the answer for you. Yeah. But really, and I know from experience, that's not how it works. The answer for your life and what you want to do is inside of you. Right. And it's because it's buried beneath all of this, extra stuff. Yeah. And so our light and our stuff inside of us, it's buried. So that's what self-care, that's the job of self-care. The job of self-care is to get to uncover that light inside of you and to really like get in alignment with yourself so that you're making decisions from abundance rather than from scarcity, like I was doing when I was running away from these jobs.
Yeah.
So I started Mary Zeal to really to build a community for women who want to use cannabis with intention, who want to use it as part of their self-care. But also I realized that my kids need to know how to do self-care and they need to know how to prioritize it because that's what they're telling me. They're like, this is great, Stacey, but how do I put this in practice? And like, what do I can you walk me through it? So that's why I started the podcast because, the High on Self-Care podcast is a way for me to communicate directly with people and to really kind of talk about what I'm doing, using my story and the stories of other people. And so I bring on experts, I have solo episodes, and I really, use it for a way to kind of push out the message of self-care and cannabis. So every episode has cannabis and self-care in it. Some episodes lean more towards self-care. Some episodes lean more towards cannabis. So I have an episode about how to get sleep using cannabis, and that's focused mainly on cannabis, but rest is self-care to me. That's a part of self-care. And then I have other episodes where we talk about mindfulness and meditation and all that kind of stuff. And then I had an expert come on and talk about that. And I brought the cannabis to the conversation because like I said, when I meditate high. And so, I talk about self-care through the lens of cannabis. Well, I talk about cannabis, I guess, through the lens of self-care. And that's really what the community is about. And so I'm looking forward to kind of grow in that community and creating things that will really help people. And, it energizes you when you have someone say oh my goodness, I tried this and I listened to your podcast. I tried this and it worked and it was amazing. And so I'm like, oh, this is great. So now I feel like I'm really in alignment with what I want to do. And I'm talking about things that I love to talk about, that I talk about every day, all day anyway. And so now I get to share that message with other women, particularly women of color, because, we stressed and we need this. Yeah, so, so that's where that kind of came from. And I'm excited to kind of see where it goes. And I definitely feel in alignment with my journey and with myself.
I love it. Well, I definitely feel the energy. So I think the alignment part is spot on, and I love it. And I definitely appreciate you stopping in. So we got to so we'll plan this later, but we need a part 2, and I'm gonna just go ahead and put it out there now and let the universe work. So,
come on, universe.
Yes, come through. But we certainly appreciate you. Before you leave, Stacey, leave us with a couple of words of encouragement for anybody who just kind of needs that entrepreneurial community or just anybody who just needs that extra word. And then also let us know where we can find you online. Be sure to drop your social media handles, websites, and all that stuff.
Yeah, so you can find me online at maryzeal.com. My podcast is called High on Self-Care. It's on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and all the places. So definitely subscribe there. And you can follow me on Instagram. Also, I'm Stacy Zeal on Instagram at Stacyzeal. And I guess something I would love to leave people with is, one, being intentional, again, with your self-care and your cannabis use. So, if the intention is to sit on the couch and relax, that's great. That's a great intention. Rest is self-care. But if you're finding that you're turning to cannabis to numb and to kind of get past things and not without having to actually like do the work to go inward to uncover to uncover these traumas and to heal and to, use it to move forward and to elevate and stuff like that. Like, that's when you might get to that point where, you're just kind of floating through life, right? Like you don't feel like you're in control or in alignment or on like a path or grounded or anything like that. So I definitely think, be intentional with your cannabis use, and then being intentional with your self-care. Honestly, that means making a commitment to yourself.
Yeah.
It's knowing that you need self-care to function, right? Like entrepreneurs, we need self-care because we are pushing out so much of our energy and our time and our knowledge to people. And so we have to fill into ourselves because we want to give people our best, right? We want to I want to give my audience my best and because I want to create results and I want to help people. So in order for me to do that, I fundamentally believe and know and grew to know, because it takes time, that I need to pour into myself first. Yeah. I need to make sure that I'm full, that I'm okay, and that I'm good before I can give my best to the world and to my audience and to my family and my friends and my people. So I encourage you to really be intentional with pouring into yourself. Like instead of just, stumbling into that yoga class, stumbling into that cardio class or whatever, actually go in there with an intention saying I am doing this for me. Yeah. I am prioritizing myself. I'm taking this time to really pour into myself. And it makes a difference because you start to tell yourself this is for me. And it starts to train your brain to realize that you need to refill your tank in order for you to give your best, right? Like you can't let your gas tank run all the way down and your car is going to break down, right? You don't want to break down. You don't want to burn out. You don't want to right. Yeah. What happens to your business if you burn out? What happens to your family or to your friends or to your community if you burn out? So rather than, pushing yourself to the ground and giving your all without filling into yourself, take that time to fill into yourself. And I like to do it in the morning. So I created a morning routine checklist. If you want to check out, go to maryzeal.com just go to maryzeal.com. It's on there. There's a morning routine checklist if you want to download it and learn how to create your own morning routine. But honestly, entrepreneurs, we really need to feed into ourselves because we push out a lot out, and feeding into yourself does not take away from your message and what you're giving to others. Just it just makes it better. And that's kind of what I would love to leave people with.
Perfect. Sounds good. All right. So y'all hop over to maryzeal.com. Make sure you get that checklist. I'm definitely going to grab it myself. And Stacy, we appreciate you being a wonderful guest. Thank you for all the gems, the knowledge, and sharing the information in regards to cannabis. And we definitely look forward to having you back. So thank you again.
Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah, definitely. Appreciate you and have a great rest of the week.
Awesome. You too.
Thanks for hanging out with us here on SOB. We hope this episode has been resourceful. If you'd like to check out the latest articles or follow Keetria's website updates, just log on to Keetria.com or follow her on Twitter at KEETRIA.